Okay, the Battle of the Stronghold, Modoc War Part 3. Okay, so it was January 1873. The soldiers, about 400 of them, set up camp at the edge of the stronghold. I'm going to show you my talented picture here. Okay, so here's Tool Lake, the lava beds. Here's the Modoc camp. It's probably a little bit closer to the lava beds. And the soldiers set up a force here and a force here and planned to press the Modoc into surrender. Okay. All right. The terrain was too rocky for horses, so the soldiers were on foot. Mostly thought that they were, and they kind of were for quite a while. So 4 a.m. rolled around, and the soldiers rallied up, and a thick fog set in, and it was so foggy, so dense that the soldiers felt blind and uneasy. So imagine just, this field, just rocks everywhere, and you cannot see whatsoever. It was tearing their gloves up. It was tearing their shoes up. And it was actually suspected that the soldiers might have killed some of their own because they were shooting at shadows. And so very well could have been fellow soldiers that they were shooting at. Didn't know. Me being military knows that that's a horrible tactical movement. Okay, so the Modoc, in this terrain that they know by now, in this dense fog, they're hiding behind rocks, using the natural crevices and ditches to attack the soldiers like ghosts. The Modocs didn't lose any warriors that day, while the soldiers lost 21. It was 9 dead, 12 wounded that died that evening. So the military retreated and decided that they would need at least 1,000 men to take down the Modoc. President Grant decided to negotiate, so there was a little pause in the war there. They had meetings, and Captain Jack wanted a reservation on that land. He claimed that no white man would be able to make a living there, but the Modoc could. But the reservation would cost $20 million, and the war cost $500,000. So this was the most expensive war, given the number of people and the fact that it was only 7 months long total. So the period of time, so this little period of time, the war's paused, it's kind of peaceful, and all of a sudden the troops move in closer to the stronghold. I wish my map was closer. And stole Captain Jack's horses, which kind of signaled that the halt in the war was over. So the troops captured the horses, and at Captain Jack, horses mean a lot to Indians, especially to the women, like next to their children. So Captain Jack went to retrieve his horses, and the military refused. So this was the beginning of the end of the peace. So the Modocs had their meeting, and Captain Jack wanted peace, but in a Indian leadership, the people tell you what to do, and you conduct it. Okay, so the Modocs voted against peace. And the treaty commissioners and the military planned a meeting, and there was a Modoc woman who acted as an interpreter that knew that the Modoc were planning to attack this meeting. And she even tried to warn them, but they had the meeting anyway. Captain Jack shot General Canby pretty much point blank. And General Canby was the only general to die in an Indian war. So, pretty bad. So, several more whites were killed in that meeting because there were Modocs surrounding the meeting, and they saw the white flag, but they've seen a white flag before, and then guy rode in and shot them all up. So really, it doesn't mean anything to them at this point. So the next general in charge, General Sherman, raged for action. He ordered the military to crush the Modocs without mercy. So they gathered 1,000 soldiers and civilians, joined together as one force. And so the second battle of the stronghold, began April 14th, 1873. There were heavy artillery, which I have one to show you, such as, can you see it? Howitzers fired into the lava beds all day, all night. And only one Modoc was killed, and that was because the guy tried to pick it up, and it blew up. And so the military went and cut off the water supply. And Captain Jack sent less than a dozen men to face the U.S. Army. And these less than a dozen men held the line firing. They lit fires. And, we're shooting, all night. And the way they did it, it gave the illusion that there was more than just a handful of Modocs. So the Modoc left the stronghold through an unknown passage, not like underground, but the military thought the Modoc were surrounded, but they missed a crevice. So the Modoc left, and they left 2 elderly Indians behind, which the soldiers scalped and killed. And so the U.S. Army sent 65 soldiers out to search the lava fields, and they stopped for lunch and were ambushed by Scarface Charlie and his crew. And in less than an hour, 22 soldiers were dead, 16 wounded. And they stopped because they felt like they had enough. They didn't... Scarface Charlie had said, "We don't want to kill you all in one day," and sent the rest of the soldiers home. Donald McKay was called in to track the Modocs. He was part Indian himself, and he was a famed scout. He led a band of Warm Spring Indians and some soldiers to the lava fields to find the Modoc. And he was pretty good at what he did, apparently, because he killed a popular Modoc warrior, sending Captain Jack and his band running. The Modocs needed food and water. They had women and children. They were becoming desperate and weary. And Modocs started turning themselves in for amnesty, basically, and because they couldn't really survive anymore out there. And they were malnourished. And some of them agreed to help hunt down Captain Jack. Talk about lack of loyalty. So And more Modocs started getting captured. And on June 1st, 1873, Captain Jack laid down his gun and surrendered. He was not captured, he was surrendered. And they asked him why he surrendered, and he said his legs were giving out. He just couldn't, they were so tired and physically weak at this point. And the soldiers killed 4 more Modocs, which were prisoners of war, right in front of their families, and their families had to ride with them in the wagons, which is pretty gnarly. At Fort Klamath, Captain Jack and 5 others were tried as war criminals with no representation. And the jury was made up of the officers who had fought against the Modoc before, so it's biased. So they found these 6 men guilty. 2 were sent to Alcatraz, and Captain Jack and the 3 others were hung on October 3rd, 1873, and the military made the Modoc people watch at the gallows. So that's basically all I have. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something about the Modoc War.